Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. You heard the open there. Jeffrey Lurie says he has real confidence that our football people can continue to build. Well, he wasn't wrong, was he? Adam Caplan is in the house. We bring him back for another edition of Football at 4. The Eagles have 2 new players. They'll have 2 more possibly after tonight. Let's get into it now with Adam Caplan for another edition of Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. Well, Adam Caplan, we had a trade. We've got Jalen Carter. They've got Nolan Smith. Some people thought they were going to take Smith at 10. They got him at 30. So let's wrap our heads around some of the things that happened last night. They trade up 1 spot to select Jalen Carter at number 9. Tell us, Adam, how it went down and why Carter is an Eagle.
Yeah, this is an amazing story, Mike. So we had our pre-show last night for Inside the Birds with Greg Cosell, and we had said how we kind of made up our mind based on our sourcing that it was going to be Jalen Carter at 10. We never talked about them trading up. We never even thought of that because we didn't think he'd make it there. But if he did make it there, that was the pick. So that was the thing that was so surprising. The key to this, and anyone who did a mock draft like I did, and I missed that one on Seattle. We all put Seattle for Jalen Carter. Him not going there. That's when Jeff and I were texting each other. We're like, oh, this is interesting. Wow, they took Devin Witherspoon? Okay. I mean, they need to start at corner, but wow, I didn't see that. And then you had the crazy Cardinals trade. And they took Paris Johnson, who, by the way, was very highly thought of by the Eagles. Based on their board, Paris Johnson certainly could have been the Eagles' pick at 10 had they stayed there and then you're not going to the Cardinals. So certain things happened. Then Tyree Wilson, his drop, which I expected because he did not work out for the draft, and Bijan Robinson going to the Falcons. Then here you go. Well, we're like, all right, well, the Bears have a major need at D tackle. We're going to learn a lot. And then the Eagles got on the clock of the trade. We're like, it has to be Jalen Carter. This is their guy. If it's not, Mike, if they didn't go for Jalen Carter here on the trade, I was dumbfounded. I'm like, I don't know who it could be. And it was Jalen Carter. So why did they do it? I believe they were concerned about other teams trading up. 1 or 2 other teams behind them, Mike, needed D tackle. Now I know that Drew Rosenhaus's agent said, we didn't need to meet with anyone outside the top 10. That's fine, but it's some of the teams could have traded up. You avoid that. They only gave them a 4, which is surprising. That's all they had to do. But they got their guy, Mike, and. Now, if you would have asked me a week ago, I would have been skeptical, but the information we got Thursday morning suggested this was going to be their guy. Jeff and I had similar information, so we went with it. But it doesn't come without risk, Mike. There's significant risk with this player.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he got into that fatal situation where there was some racing and somebody had obviously some teammates and some staffers back after the national championship game. I think he has been... There was a fine and a probation for him. I think that was basically the extent of the penalty that he will serve for this. There's nothing further on that, correct?
Unless law enforcement has something coming, no. But let's not forget, it's tragic. Multiple people lost their lives. It's awful from the football program. And we're going to outline this when we drop our show Monday morning, but there's some other issues with him. We talked to a lot of teams about him, particularly the final 24 hours before the draft. Maturity is a big thing with him. There's just some issues that every team, by the way, knows about all this stuff. Some stuff that happened to the Georgia program.
Yeah.
But the Eagles knew about it. Every other team did. They had all their information, and they decided to go with them.
Right. I will say this, Adam, and you could probably touch on this a little more. The Eagles are a pretty good organization in terms of doing their due diligence. I mean, if
yes,
they're not going to take a guy if they think that there's going to be an issue.
Well, I don't know about that. Mike, their hope is, based on their information, that he'll be a better person. That's probably a mixture of what you're thinking, what I'm thinking. It doesn't mean that he might not have a maturity issue going forward where he's a young person. We all have to grow up at some time. So we can't just think like, oh, he's going to be perfect from here on out. Life doesn't work that way in your early 20s. I can attest to that. A lot of us went for our stuff through our 20s. But you're right. They did a ton of due diligence. They have, through NFL security, through Dom DeSandro, Howie Roseman talked about the marvelous, amazing chief of security, whatever, VP of security. I think they upped his title for more money. He's phenomenal. So yeah, they had to live with it. It's pretty interesting. I'll admit I was wrong. I did not think. The only thing I was wrong about is I did not think he'd make it that far. But apparently, but think of it this way. Look at the teams that needed to be tackled. The Seattle Seahawks, the one team that's taken major risks on players of the year, they didn't want them. Think about that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I said yesterday at the end of the show, Adam, with Andrew, we made our picks, and I said they'll either A, trade up to get Jalen Carter, or stay at number 10 and draft Nolan Smith. Well, they drafted Nolan Smith at number 30. So let's talk about number 10. Were there any other considerations at number 10 had Carter been taken? In other words, if they couldn't trade up to get Carter, were there other considerations if they just stayed where they were?
No, we always find this out after the draft, kind of what would have happened if certain things happened. I think Peter Skoronski, I can't say for sure. My sense is it would have been Skoronski over Van Ness. The Eagles love both players, but just remember this: Jeff Statlin's voice rings large in the pre-draft meetings and for agency and how they roster build. And obviously Skoronski went right after 10 at 11 to the Titans, and then Van Ness went a couple picks later. But the shocker, I have to tell you, I know this is an Eagles segment, but I have to tell you, the Lions at 12 taking Jahmyr Gibbs, you could have pushed me over with a feather. I was shocked. Now, he's a good player, and I know teams generally go by their grades, usually. Eagles always haven't done it, but as we saw with Rager 2020, but that was just absolute stunner. I didn't see that at all.
Yeah, I think that was one of the spots in this draft that many people said, 12 for Gibbs? Okay, you probably could have got him at 18. And at 18, if they took him, people probably would have been stunned. But, hey, everybody likes who they get. What about the Eagles' defensive line rotation now? Carter and what he adds. How does that stack up after day one?
The great thing about his selection, now this is provided everything's okay with him off the field, going forward. He needs to make sure he's in very good physical shape. He was not at his pro day workout. If everything's good and he's got a good off season, because they've already started OTAs, and once he gets acclimated, and once we get through the OTA period, remember the Eagles are the first team done now. When they're done, they're the first team done their off season due to the agreement between players and Sirianni. So they're off for the summer a week to 10 days before the other teams are. So they're done usually by mid-June now with this coaching staff. So you got to make sure he's doing everything when he's away from the team. So if he shows up to training camp in good shape, he'll dress on game day. It'll be primarily a four-man rotation. Cox and Carter is your three techniques. Jordan Davis, Contavious Street being your noses. So Street's got, as I understand it, he can play the three. He can play the nose. Eagles will play some 5. 4-eye. They'll have great depth. Jordan Davis, obviously, and Milton Williams. And to really, if everybody's healthy and Jordan Davis shows up in good shape, and with Contavious Street, that's a 5-man rotation on game day. That's pretty darn good, Mike. That's glad you asked us. This went from a good rotation to an excellent one. But there's no Javon Hargrave. Now, Hargrave became a much better pass rusher over the years with the Steelers and then with the Eagles than I think people probably thought he could do. Coming from South Carolina State. Now, could Jalen Carter be that guy as a pass rusher? That's a lot to expect. But Jalen Carter has actually got more in him, Mike, as a potential great player than Hargrave does. Hargrave just has this great trigger quickness. Carter is bigger physically and incredibly strong.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how they rotate those guys, that tackle position, what the playing time looks like, what way Sean Desai uses Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, where Milton Williams fits in. They signed the free agent this offseason as well. They get Nolan Smith at number 30. Some questions, wait, they would have probably been interested in him at number 10. Why is he on the board at number 30?
Yeah, I don't think they would have drafted him at 10. I'd have to go through their entire list that we have. We kind of know who their targets were. But what we did talk about, and this is ironic, is that he was one of the trade-down players we were given. Well, they didn't have to trade down for it, Mike. This is a bizarre draft, and we said this on our show leading up. It's going to be a strange draft. We didn't know how it would unfold, of course. There's no way to know. Teams didn't know. But it was going to be a strange unfolding. There were some things that went true. We said Smith and Jigbo is kind of a lot to be the first receiver taken, barring a highly unforeseen circumstance that held true. People do mock drafts knew this was not a surprise. Skronsky is probably going to be one of the first couple offensive linemen drafted, but Darnell Wright went over him, so that was a surprise. Okay, but Skronsky was going to be drafted high. He was. Vanessa was going to be drafted in the upper half. He was. But there were some surprises in terms of positional value. Emmanuel Forbes at number 16 being drafted over Christian Gonzalez. Wow, I didn't see that happening. There were some Jack Campbell, you mentioned Detroit at 18. Jack Campbell, an off-the-ball linebacker, really at 18? Wow, that surprised me. Elijah Cansey going as high as 19. Wow. I was texting with someone very close to me yesterday. They were loving that one. Now, let's get to Nolan Smith. Okay, why did he drop, right? Multiple teams told me during the draft, before the pick was made, and after the pick, he's a guy because he's a little bit smaller than you would ideally like, Mike. You're not sure you're going to line him up. And he's not really a 4-3 DN because he's too small. He's definitely a 34 outside linebacker. He just runs some 34. He's a backup Sam linebacker for Hassan Reddick. If they go to a 34 front, he'll play the other outside linebacker stand-up spot. There are a variety of ways you can use him. He cannot play on the ball like he did at Georgia. He's just too small. That was a problem for teams. But here's the problem with that, Mike. It doesn't excuse the fact that he fell so far. He's just a very good football player. I know teams don't. Every team's board is different, but it always bothers me. Like, why do you pass up a good football player to make excuses? Teams do this, and I'm not an Eagles homer, as you know. I'm just giving you the way the league looks at it. Teams make mistakes all the time. We'll find out over the next 3 to 4 years who was right and who was wrong. But I believe the Eagles are going to be right on this one.
Yeah, so let's take a look about, Smith, obviously, why he dropped it. And you talked a little bit about, where he fits in terms of playing time. Is this a guy they look at, let's get him in right away, let's get him to be, is he an impact player from day one, or is he a guy that's here to kind of be an apprentice to a guy like Hassan Reddick?
It's a great question. All right, so Greg Cosell said this in our pre-show last night. There weren't a lot of snaps of it, and I know coaches love this when you can do it. So particularly if he's a stack linebacker. So what he did at Georgia, because they were an odd man front, very little, but there were some snaps where he lined up as an inside linebacker and rushed off of it. Coaches love that. If you could find an inside linebacker that could rush, I mean, that's like a bonus. That's another bonus. Now, I would think, Mike, initially he'll back up Reddick. And then there are other instances where BG plays the short edge sometimes when they play a 43 front. You'll see him. Well, actually, when he stands up, sometimes you'll see him on the short edge because he's so small. You don't need to give him a long way to go. Sometimes he'll play the wide 9. He goes play the wide 9, by the way. Sometimes they'll be creative. As one source told me, this is a matchup guy. This is a creative player you have here. You need to figure out, like Sean Desai, you mentioned him. This is going to be sort of a toy for him. This is not a guy you're ordinarily going to be given. This is a very unique football player. I mentioned Brian Burns in our pre-draft show leading up. That yes, Brian Burns is a little longer. Now, Brian Burns, by the way, this is amazing. Brian Burns was 228 at the prior to the draft. He was 228 at one point. Nolan Smith was 238. Brian Burns, by the way, was much skinnier and taller. And then he went up being around 250 because he put on weight. So Nolan Smith may, hopefully he gets between 245 and 248 over the next couple of years. He's still, it would behoove him. But this guy's a joker here. He may be a guy that you move around a lot. He probably will be.
Adam, you got any thoughts on what the rotation might look like at that linebacker position? I mean, that is an area linebacker I think is still kind of, very interesting to kind of analyze as we head into day 2.
So you got your off the ball inside guys. They're still, as I'm told, it's going to be an odd man front. So Morrow and Dean are your projected inside linebackers, right? If they go to 43, Reddick is your Sam. If they're 5-1, Reddick is your Sam. It just depends. It just depends what Reddick doesn't line up a lot at the end. I mean, he has, but he just doesn't. He's too small. But now Josh Sweat obviously is a DN. I know Greg Cosell always says he laughs when people say he's an outside linebacker. The guy's a DN, but they do stand him up a little bit. It's kind of. I also think, Michael, will be the rotation. Well, I should mention this will be dependent also on who they're playing. If they've got a team that's got a bad offensive line, you might see a package. Mike, think about this: Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, Son Reddick, Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox. You might have like an all super duper NASCAR pack. You might one where they just put pass rushers in the field. They have this opportunity, Mike. I'm so glad you asked this.
Yeah.
They're going to be able to do some things like I'm just thinking of this as you're asking me. Because they did. This is like Sean Desai probably never thought of that. Well, he probably knew that he knew how much they loved Carter, but he didn't know they were definitely going to get him. No one did. So they get him, and now you have this. You've got the whole offseason to do this. And by the way, they're working on their install now for week 1, and they'll find out soon who they're going to be playing. So this is going pretty funny, Mike, what this looks like. Actually fun, I should say. And when we go to training camp, this is kind of where we knew. This is where Mosher and I knew when we went to training camp, Reddick had a chance to be special because we saw no one could. Sometimes guys would not even touch him. He's too fast. If Nolan Smith is as good as they say, he's a super kid, really smart and all that, you put this speed on the field with this power up front, this thing could be really interesting to see.
Adam Caplan, football for InsideTheBirds.com, the Inside the Birds podcast, joining us here on the Sports Bash. Don't forget, day 2 tonight starts at 7 o'clock right here on 97.3 ESPN. Before we get to the draft for tonight, Adam, the Eagles got an extra pick tonight because of a violation by the Cardinals in their recruitment of John Gannon as their head coach. So the John Gannon haters are probably like, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out," and thank you for the extra pick. What happened here?
So you can't, without asking permission, you can't contact a coach who's under contract with another team, no matter what the circumstance is. And they did it without permission. Now, I know teams are pissed off. Why are they pissed off? Because I've never heard this before in 21 years. The league didn't decide this. The Eagles and the Cardinals agreed on what the compensation should be. How the hell is that allowed?
I can't even comprehend it, right? I can't comprehend that the league just said, okay, or I don't know that they said it, but they just allowed, right, hey, you two, come up with an agreement on compensation here.
I don't know this, and I'm just totally speculating, but I was laughing with someone from the team this morning. I was telling Moshe the same thing. Would it shock anyone if John Ferrari, the Eagles, one of their assistant GMs, I think he had one assistant GM last year with Al Calabi, but he's an operations guy. Remember, he came from the league. He's their league liaison. He's brilliant, apparently. He's great at figuring league stuff out, whatever. Would it shock anyone if he suggested this? I'm just saying. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just guessing. But it would, because how else could this happen? Come on. It's ridiculous.
It's totally crazy. So they get 66 tonight, a pick they did not originally have. They'll have 62 and 66. I know we don't look at need all the time or whatever, but tonight, what are some spots that you are looking for or should be on the lookout for?
All right, let me get my best player available file, which I sent to my friends at Sports Grid. I am on Sports Grid tonight, and why am I not?
By the way, that will be pick 62, which is the back end of the second round. and then 66, which is the third pick of the third round.
Yeah, Mike, I believe it'll be, I think you're looking at safety, Mike. I think that's pretty realistic. I would probably say cornerback. Don't be shocked at that. In guard, Cody Mock's a guy they like from North Dakota State. The safety from Illinois is a guy to take a look at. Brian Branch is not making it, guys. I know people are saying, like, oh, he can make it there. I'd be shocked. I'll give you the names. Joey Porter Jr., he's not going to make it. That'd be an Eagle if he did. Brian Branch, again, not going to make it, but I'll put him on there anyway, barring a shocker. Sidney Brown's the safety I was talking about of Illinois. I know they like very much. Josh Downs is a slot receiver. If he made it to them late in the second, sure. But the good thing is, Mike, because they got the D lineman. There's nothing they have to do, but man, it would be so good if they got a safety. It really would.
All right, Adam Caplan, of course, football at 4 next week. We'll recap the entire draft, set you up for training camp. The schedule comes out, by the way, on Thursday, May the 11th, so you still have a little bit of football to look forward to in this offseason, which the draft culminates on Saturday right here on 97.3 ESPN. And check out the Inside the Birds podcast, as you guys will be wrapping up the entire draft next week. All that will drop on the Inside the Birds platforms. All right, Adam Caplan, enjoy the draft this weekend.
Thank you.
All right, Adam Caplan with us here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.